So I think the first order of business, Athena, do you want to run this part, electing a chair?
I'm happy to if you'd like me to.
Yeah, I think that's the appropriate thing to do.
All right, we're calling the budget coordinating group to order at 12:02 p.m. I'm just going to go and make sure everyone can hear and be heard since this is a remote meeting. Len Griesmer,
Present.
Matt Larson,
Here.
Andy Steinberg,
Present.
Irv Rhodes,
Present.
Paul Bockelman,
Present.
Mandy Johanneke,
Present.
Dr. Xiomara Herman,
Present.
Tillman Wolf,
Present.
Deb Leonard,
Present.
Melissa Zawadzki,
Present.
Anna Devlin Gauthier,
Present.
Sharon Cherry,
Here.
and Shannon Bernacchio.
Here.
Okay, great. So the first order of business is electing a chair and vice chair. I'll run the election of the chair and then hand it over to them to run the election of the vice chair. Deb, did you have a question?
No.
Oh, okay, your hand went up for a moment. So we'll open the floor to nominations. The nominations don't require a second. You can nominate yourself. The nominee will accept the nomination or not, and then there will be a moment for statements before the committee takes a vote. Irv, do you have a question?
No, I just want to nominate.
Okay, so the floor is open for nominations. Irv.
I nominate Lynn as chair.
Okay, Lynn, do you accept the nomination?
I do.
Are there other nominations? Deb?
I nominate Anna Devon Gauthier.
Anna, do you accept?
I'm honored. At this time, I do not accept. Sorry, Deb, but thank
Okay.
you.
Are there other nominations? Lynn, would you like to make a statement?
Very brief. Thank you for the nomination. This is a very important group at a very important time.
Would anyone else like to make a comment before the vote? Okay, so I'm looking for a motion to elect Lynn Griesmer as chair of the budget coordinating group.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you. We'll move to a vote. Lynn, we'll start with you because you're first on my screen.
Aye.
Nat?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Irv?
Yes.
Mandy?
Aye.
Tillman?
Aye.
Deb?
No.
Anna?
Aye.
And Shannon?
Yes.
Wait, is Shannon a staff member?
hmm
Yes, I'm sorry. Okay, it's unanimous. Lynn, I'm handing things off to you.
It's not unanimous.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no.
With one no. Lynn, you
Thank you.
could take
So
over.
the floor is now open for nominations for vice chair. Andy Steinberg.
I nominate Irv Rhodes.
Okay. Irv, do you accept?
I accept.
Anna Devlin Gauthier.
I'd like to nominate Deb Leonard.
Deb, do you accept?
I do.
Okay. Are there any other nominations? Irv, would you like to make a statement?
Yes, I've been on this committee for some time, and I've also been involved with the finances for the town for quite some time. I also sat on the school committee, which is a really big segment of the budget. And I believe I have an overall perspective on the budget that will allow for us to move forward in a cohesive manner. And I really would appreciate your vote.
Deb, would you like to make a comment?
Sure. I've spent a lot of time this past year, and certainly most recently, trying to understand both the school budget and the town budget and the balance of the two. And I think I would bring that level of detail and perspective to the committee. Thank you. Thank you for the nomination.
Is there anyone on the committee that would like to make a comment? Anna Devlin Gauthier.
Yeah, I hadn't asked Deb if if I could nominate her, so I appreciate the on the fly acceptance. But the reason why I wanted to nominate Deb for the position of vice chair is that I've seen her engaged in the financial pictures for both the region and the elementary schools as her role as a school committee member in a very detailed and considerate way. And I think that Deb would be a new vice chair on this committee in terms of bringing in some voices to the table who have been engaging in the conversation a bit more recently. I think that could be always an important aspect to consider. So I've appreciated how Deb has gone about this conversation when we've worked together at Four Towns meetings, and all of the data that she's brought to the table. And I think that she will bring a balanced perspective between the schools, library, and town as we go forward in a year that's going to be a really tough one.
Are there others that would like to make a comment? Andy Steinberg.
Yeah, this is going to be a difficult vote for all of us because these are two really well qualified people. The reason that I nominated Irv, and with some difficulty because I have great appreciation and respect for Deb, but will vote for Irv too, is that we have worked together for a very long time. Irv mentioned his long experience. Both of us served on the original finance committee back at the time that the budget coordinating group was created. And I have great confidence in Irv's long-term perspective and understanding of municipal finance and the financial pressures that are on all aspects that are represented here, the schools, the town, the library, and sees the big picture. And I feel like he would offer a great contribution.
Are there any other comments from people? Seeing none, then I'm going to just go by the order you are on the screen for the voting members, and I ask you to cast your vote for one or the other, or abstain, etc. Nat Larson.
I'll vote for Deb.
Lynn Griesmer is Irv Rhodes. Andy Steinberg.
Irv Rhodes.
Irv Rhodes.
Irv Rhodes.
Counselor Haneke.
Deb Leonard.
Tillman Wolf.
Deb Leonard.
Deb Leonard.
Deb Leonard.
And Anna Devlin Gothier.
Deb Leonard.
Did I get everybody that's a voting member?
Mhm.
Yes. Deb, congratulations. The vote is 5 in favor of Deb, 3 in favor of Rhodes. Our next responsibility, our next item on the agenda is to ask the town manager to open with kind of a statement of the financial condition and other things that have come up since a BCG meeting last met.
Thank you, Lynn. So last time we talked was at the financial indicators meeting. It's one of the times we talked. And we've been sharing information. And one of the things, the goal today is to share our latest projections, which we will share with you and update you with additional information. Last time we met, we said we were going to wait till the end of January, which is when we anticipated hearing about the governor's budget and also our health insurance, which we have information on both of those things. I do want to start, though, by recognizing that we are in an incredibly difficult time on budget, but on multiple other levels. And I just want to recognize the work that our staff, especially at the schools, and I know on our side, are going through with these federal disruption, which has been uncertain and unstable. And Sharon and I had a conversation this morning about how it's impacting the library services. The level of uncertainty and chaos is something I have never seen before in decades of service in the public sector. There's constantly changing information. The flip-flopping on what's going on is one thing, then the next day it's something else. For our staff and for our elected leaders, I know it's really hard to process. These are real issues that are impacting people's lives. And I just think I want to ground ourselves in thinking about recognizing that we're all on the same in this in the same boat and on the same team in this community. I'm really proud to be part of this community that stands on very strong values. So that's my opening statement. I just think we all have to recognize that we're in a really uncertain world as we go through this budget process, and we need to be taking proactive measures, but also we have to do protective measures to make sure that we are protecting the people that we serve the best we can. I also want to recognize that the taxpayers are where we get most of our money, that the debt exclusion for the new school is going to start hitting for real in FY26, and people are going to see their taxes go up in addition to any regular increase that they would expect to see. So I mentioned, and I'm not going to get into a long conversation, but we want to get to the spreadsheet because I think that's really what you guys want to see. We have talked about state aid and health insurance. I'm going to start with the worst news is our health insurance increase. We received health insurance increases from our insurer of 19.92%. It's a dramatic increase for all department, everybody who here. And there are many things that are contributing to that. There are external factors such as rising healthcare costs, but our rates are going up at this high level mainly due to our experience. Our employees are using health insurance at such a rate that the insurer is losing money on our business. So our loss ratio is much higher at the top peak of all the cities and towns that Maya insures. Our experience is our experience. We own that, and it's very real in what people are using, and that I understand why the insurer is saying we need to increase your rates to help cover the costs of the services that you're using. I'm just going to address health insurance for a minute. This is something that's shared by employees and by our this library school in town. These costs impact us all pretty dramatically. And we are working with the law requires us to have an insurance advisory committee, which is comprised of the representatives from all the collective bargaining units in this town, in the schools, and non-union reps as well. And we'll be meeting this afternoon actually to start reviewing these increases and talk about things that we can do to lower that high percentage increase. And there are some things we can do that I think our employees are partners in this, and they are well-educated people on this, on health insurance on our committee. And so we will be talking about the ways that we can lower that percentage to make it less onerous. It's no matter where it goes, it's going to be in double digits, and it's going to be a hard thing to swallow. But we will be working on that. We will be working vigorously over the next few weeks. The lead will be taken by the Insurance Advisory Committee, which is chaired by one of our fire captains and has representation from all the different unions. Assistant chief, actually now, assistant fire chief. And we'll start to work through what are our options in terms of what we can do to lower that cost of health insurance, and everything is on the table. In terms of state aid, at the governor has released her budget, which is usually our starting point on state aid. And I just ask Melissa, our finance director, to share what the net impact of the state aid is.
So the state aid went up about 2.8%, about $500,000. But unfortunately, our assessments went up significantly as well, to the tune of about $400,000, leaving us with a net gain in state receipts over last year of $117,000. So it's a very modest increase, under 1% over last year when you balance the new revenues with the increasing costs.
So what we have done, and we'll go through this, we've reviewed the town council's budget guidelines, and we've built this projection in compliance with the council's budget guidelines. The council asked us to look more deeply at all of our local receipts, which we have done. We've tried to adjust things as we can. And what we can say today is that we are projecting a 3.5% increase for all of our for all of our the town. And I think, Melissa, it might be best just to start going through the spreadsheet. And is this in the packet, or do we have this?
It's not been put in the packet yet.
But we'll put it in the packet. Yeah.
I just want to mention that as soon as we're done with this presentation, we'll ask for clarifying questions on anything that's been said.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so I guess we'll start with the revenues. And so as I'm sure everyone here is aware, property taxes are allowed to go up by 2.5%. You'll notice that our property taxes went up by 3.5%, and that increase is driven by the fact that our new growth in fiscal 25, which was just certified at the end of December, was significant. And so when the new growth goes up, it builds into our base going forward. So that that's how we come up with a 3.5% increase within 2.5. Outside of that, you'll notice that the overall property tax increase is 5.7. 2.1 million of that is for the override. So that money is specifically set aside for the debt exclusion payments associated with the Fort River School. That 2.1 million is an estimate that we have based on borrowing that we anticipate to do in the next several months as the project moves forward and we need to start spending that money. So we borrowed a little bit this year, and there's a small impact on tax bills, and then there'll be a more significant one on the tax bills going forward in the fiscal 26 budget. Second group is the local receipts, and as we had talked about, one area where we had received some guidance to increase those local receipts. We took a look at that, and so you can see that they're increased what I think is significantly over the prior year's estimates, although not exceeding the prior year's actuals. And part of that is that these are estimates, and many of these revenues are tied to economic conditions and interest rates, specifically with the investment income. So we pushed them the increases significantly. And so we're up 11% over last year in this one category. Thirdly, we talked about the state aid. We talked about that briefly earlier. The state aid has gone up a small amount, 2.8%, but we want to just also recognize that unfortunately part of that is offset by the increased assessments, which we'll go over when we get to the expenditure portion of our presentation here. It doesn't impact this part of the budget, but I guess it's fair to mention for both the school and the libraries, the offset receipts. Those are receipts designated from the state that go directly to those departments, specifically the charter, the choice tuition in, and the public library assistance. Both went down slightly. So that's just an impact on those particular departments to be aware of. The other financing sources remains pretty stable. The only reason that it goes down at all is because we had one-time money in the budget last year that we do not have that as an income in this year's budget. Overall, the increase in the overall revenues is 5%, but again, a large majority of that has to do with the increase for the debt exclusion. And so that money is already allocated to pay for that new school. So yeah, great. So in the expenditure category, we did an increase of 3.5% across all of the operational areas, the town, the regional school, the elementary school, and the Jones Library. The way I've demonstrated it here, what we wanted to be able to show is that the 2% or $355,000 from fiscal 25 that was one-time money was built into the base, and they were given 3.5% on both their original base and that additional base, which is represented here as a 5.5% increase because it's 5.5 from the tax revenue increase. When we had to move that revenue source went away, so we had to absorb that in our increases from tax revenue. But basically what that is a 3.5% increase on the regional school, but from their base of the that included the 355 that was added late in the process last year. So I just wanted to explain that part of that operating budget. Our capital budget remains pretty consistent. There are several variations in the lines, but the two things I want to bring your attention to and what the controlling factors are is if you see at the bottom where it says the $6.7 million, that's a 4% increase, and that's based on a 10.5 of the tax levy, and that's based on the guidance we received from the council on that we were going to try and maintain the 10.5% of the tax rate available for capital. That $6 million is made up of the regional tax assessment and the debt service, short-term interest, and cash capital. All four of those categories met together to make that $6 million, and movement between them does not change this bottom line number. The 2.1 million and the 6 million that are from other funding sources, the debt exclusion, of course, we can only spend the tax we raise for debt exclusion on debt. So that's what that is. And we can only spend CPA capital on CPA capital. We cannot be used for other things. So this large increase of the 21% in capital is primarily driven by the increase in that debt exclusion. So I just wanted to explain that. Miscellaneous, our retirement system, as we dug into the numbers, was not as big of an increase as we had thought in the past. So bringing that number down to a more reasonable increase of 2.5% helped us create this budget projection. And based on guidance we received from the council this year, the OPEB contribution is going to remain the same at $600,000. And then finally, in unappropriated uses, the state assessments, you can see there that it went up $410,000, which, that's why our overall change from the governor's cherry sheets didn't go up as much as maybe we had hoped, because with the offset of the expenses, it's only $117,000. And so overall, the budget's going up 5.5, but I think in reality, you'll notice that the places that are driving that have to do with the debt exclusion. So really, it's 3.5 is consistent throughout all the different budget categories, going up between 3 and 2%. And I guess if we have any questions, I do have a small surplus because I didn't try and make it zero by, so we're still working on the numbers, and hopefully we'll be able to have more clarity when we get more information, new numbers from the state, more detail on, what our costs are.
So
So when
thank you.
Oh. Yeah,
Go ahead.
okay.
Sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I did want to say that Paul had mentioned it earlier that if we look at the increases for each of the governmental units, that that health insurance increase that we are talking about hits inside that 3.5% increase for all of those governmental units, and it is quite challenging to manage. And I can say that I don't know the school's numbers, but I'm sure they do, that number essentially eclipses our entire increase, and we haven't even taken into account our collective bargaining agreements or other contractual obligations we have going forward. So this is going to be a very challenging year for all four of the groups, because I don't think that their picture looks much different than anyone else's.
Thank you, Melissa. Yeah, so that was I was going to jump in. The health insurance is a brutal reality that we're facing again, and we will be continuing to work on that, and we will be continuing to look at all the numbers and sort of battle test every number that we have to do the best that we can. And I think the next major piece of information that we expect to get would be the House Ways and Means budget, which hopefully will have a more positive information. And our, I anticipate, by the end of the month, early March, we would have an updated numbers for everybody. So I'm sure there'll be questions.
Right. So let's go with questions regarding the presentation. And then, and Sharon, Shannon, that is from anybody. I saw your hand up. And then we'll actually go to individual statements, but let's, at this point, stick with the presentation we just saw and questions regarding it. Deb Leonard.
Hi, I have several questions. Should I do one at a time?
Go start, please.
What is the split for the health insurance between the town and the employee contribution?
It depends on the plan. So I think it's 75% for the PPO and 80% for the HMO. Holly, is that accurate?
I believe that is accurate.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, that is correct.
Do you
Yep.
repeat that, please?
We offer two plans, a PPO and an HMO.
Yeah.
The town pays 80% of the HMO, which is the lower cost plan, and 75% of the PPO, which is the higher cost plan. Most of our employees are on the HMO.
The assessments, how do those break down in categories? In particular, the finance committee letter to Paul from Melissa talked about including retirement and OPEB in a different line. Is that reflected here or under assessments instead of miscellaneous?
Just to clarify, I think you mean the budget guidelines adopted by the full council?
No, just from finance committee meeting on yesterday.
I see. Okay.
Holly has her hands up.
Holly, please.
Yeah, if I may, that note is actually old. We combined, we moved that a couple of years ago, so it is reflected in these numbers, and it has been reflected in these numbers for the last couple of years.
In which category?
I don't have it in front of me right now. Melissa, down at the
you mean in the projection sheet?
the OPEB and retirement on the projections sheet. She's referring to the third quarter or the first quarter report that we put out yesterday is what she's referring to, where there was a blurb about that. So it is in the assessments. It is completely separated down there at the bottom. You see the OPEB and the retirement. The retirement does include, and I think this is where your question may be going. The retirement does include the school retirement. The OPEB is the town's contribution to our OPEB. It is not the school's contribution. There's pieces of it that may belong to the elementary school, but it is mostly the town and the enterprise funds OPEB responsibilities there.
Deb, do you have a follow-on question with that?
Yeah, when you say schools, you mean the elementary schools, the three elementary.
Elementary.
Okay. Thank you.
And can I just ask that document from yesterday's finance committee meeting now be added to the packet for this meeting? Thank you. Deb, do you have additional questions?
The end of December, the end of December certification for new growth, which line is that reflected in the presentation?
It's at the top under the tax levy that says new growth for fiscal 2025.
So that's the 1 million something or the
1.2 million, yeah.
1.2. Okay, thank you. That's it.
Okay. Shannon.
Yes. So with the health insurance, I'm assuming you'll look at a plan redesign to help bring that percentage down. And I know you mentioned a few weeks. Do you have a better estimated time frame in terms of when we have to vote the school budgets in March? I'm wondering if we will know before then, so we can have the best estimate in there and not reduce positions that we wouldn't have to if we knew that final number.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good question. So we will be meeting this afternoon, as I said, with our insurance advisory committee. That's a requirement before we make plan design changes. There's some things that we can do unilaterally. There's some things that, but we have to must do consultation. There are some things that are collective bargaining issues, and I think the teacher's contract has more specificity in it than the town side contracts. So there may be, if we try to change some things, there may be a duty to bargain by the district. So those are the types of things that we're unpacking right now. So I think, if for instance, in terms of plan design changes, there's a certain amount that we can do, but we try to do it in consort with our labor, with all of our with our employee partners.
Holly, did you want to add to that answer?
I just want to say though that we are planning to move fast. We are planning to try to meet weekly until we can get there. I mean, we understand. I'm not sure how that time frame is going to work with your time frame, but Maya will also have a deadline for us. So
okay. Thank you.
We will update you.
Hillman.
A quick clarification question on the income side. You showed that some of the income streams go directly to the units such as school choice. And I wanted to know if the charter assessment reimbursement goes to the town or does it go to the schools?
So just like Chapter 70, the charter reimbursement comes in as, part of the overall general fund. But the school and the charter out is part of the general fund, and the choice out is part of the general fund, but the choice in is designated specifically for school use purposes. That's how those break down. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Deb Leonard.
Just to follow up on Tillman's question, there's the schools, there's a regional school system and the elementary school system, and my understanding is that the
regional school gets their own cherry sheet estimates that is not included in this presentation at all. That's separate, and this Chapter 70, this choice and charter are related to the elementary schools.
Okay, so Tillman sits on the regional school district, not the Amherst school district.
Mm-hmm. Right, but they have their own. It operates in a similar fashion, and they have their own cherry sheet assessments.
Thank you.
And charges. I mean, revenues.
Mm-hmm.
So I raised my hand because I have a question. With your experience, Paul, once we have made adjustments to our insurance package and we go back to Maya, is there any possibility that they will use that as an opportunity to make up some of the difference they're losing on us?
No, the way it works is Maya will be part of these conversations, and they say, if you make this change, it will save you 1%. If you make that change, you will save 2%. And we start to work together to reduce those percentages the best we can, and that will be and again, we try to get it through consensus with all of our labor partners, but sometimes we will go, that's how we always want to begin the conversation. But and in terms of Shannon's response, yes, time is of the essence for all of us because we're all building our budgets now. And so I think that, trying to get something in the next 3 or 4 weeks is what our goal is.
Are there other questions about the comments and presentation that have been made so far? Okay, then it's an opportunity now for individual groups to make some report on their own budget status. And we're going to start with the library where we have Nat and Sharon.
Hi, everybody. Okay, well, y'all pretty much said it all. When I went to bed last night, I had a certain set of comments that I was going to say to you today. And then when I woke up this morning, the first words out of my mouth after reading poor Melissa's email was OMG. A 20% health insurance increase is really, really, really bad. The draft FY26 budget that I put together for the library in preparation for this meeting, we used a 13% increase for health insurance, and that was bad enough. But now a 20% increase, to any line is devastating. Since 2018, which was 7 years ago, the library has been unable to fill 3 of our full-time positions. Huge loss for the library. And this annual, an annual 3% increase, although I appreciate the extra, half a percent, that's helpful. Thank you. It's not keeping up with all of these fixed costs. And I know I'm preaching to the choir. This isn't unique to the library. Every year it's happening. Granted, it hasn't been 20% in previous years that I can remember, but it's absolutely preventing the library from being able to keep up with patron demand. And I'll just stop there. Yeah, I know I'm preaching to the choir. Thank you for the opportunity.
Nat, was there anything you wanted to add to that? Okay. Counselor Haneke, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just had a clarifying question for the library director. You said 3 full-time positions have been unfilled. Is that because you can't find people or because the budget does not have the money to pay those 3 positions that you've had in the past?
Correct. Yeah. These are 3 people that retired, and I don't have the money to afford to replace them. Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any other clarifying questions regarding the library or any other questions for the library? Okay, and then we're going to move to the schools. Deb and Irv and Tillman for the regional schools, as well as Dr. Z. Who wants to start?
I'll jump in first.
Thank you.
I think when I got the inclination of the 20%, I did not sleep well. I have had a headache since. I just want to say that we already were struggling to identify specific positions and keep programming running for our schools. So at the region, we are upwards of a 1.7 million with the current projection of 19.92. And we're preparing to go into 4 towns. I did meet with my principals prior to this just to give them a little foresight into what we learned as well as how it impacts us. At Amherst, our deficit would then be 1.8 million. So we're looking at, I'm going to just say 2 million at both the region and 2 million at both Amherst in terms of deficits. We do have some planning meetings for the rest of the week. Shannon and Kate has been running some numbers, and we plan to present it by school, what that deficit is going to be so that they can start to look at programming. It is going to cripple us if we don't do something differently. It was already hard before, and it's going to be harder now.
Did Deb or Irv, did you have anything you wanted to state on behalf of Amherst?
Just in terms, not only just in terms of Amherst, but also for the region. The numbers that Dr. Z just put out are crippling numbers. for our schools. And every dollar that is mentioned impacts a student, impacts a kid, it impacts our children. And so I know that there have been concerns in the past by members of the community, especially the council, in terms of the schools not being able to live within their means. But I think that we're at a point here where we need to come together to look at not only the cost drivers that are driving our costs, and that some of those costs that people are saying, well, you need to control those costs. Some of those costs are literally out of our control. And so what I want this group to understand is that both the region and the school, the Amherst schools, face these crippling costs, and it is not because we are not trying to control our costs. Believe me, I know Dr. Z and her staff have been after this for some time, and that we will continue to look at each and every category of costs. But I also wish to remind everyone here that our costs are driven by students who occupy a seat in a school, and that some of those costs are not controllable by us, and that needs to be understood.
Deb or Tillman, did either one of you want to add anything at this point?
Yes.
Please go ahead, Deb.
Just looking at positions, because prior to coming into this meeting, the reduction, we were looking at reductions for the Amherst schools of 5 positions in central office and 13.2 positions in terms of our teachers, clerical workers, and paras. And that section, just that section alone, the unit A and B, teachers, clericals, and paras, was the 13.2 reductions was a savings of $664,000. So now if we're looking at a 2 million, an additional 2 million, which is essentially an additional 900,000 reduction, you're looking at another 13.76, another 17 positions. So you're looking at if I did that right, you're looking at a 35 total, but 30 position reduction at the elementary schools.
Tillman?
I just want to say that I fully agree with Irv about the impact that budget changes have to the school, and that this is something that really, is noticeable. That points out that this will really have an impact on the available teachers. And we're going to spend more time talking about this on the Four Towns meeting. But one thing I want to point out is that a large variability in terms of what the schools have available over time is really challenging to deal with, because if we now trim teacher positions, it will be hard to get them back at the same quality and provide some, continuity to the schools. So I understand the pressures, but I hope we can understand that this is not something that can be turned on and off quickly year over year. Thank you.
Deb, did you want to add anything before I go to questions?
Yeah, about the region, I am an near school committee representative, but I have studied the region's budget a fair amount, and I understand the impact of level services, state levels, the impact of more or less unchanging state revenue is strains all sectors, but especially in terms of the region, essentially all of our 10 million, 9 million from the state goes to these costs that Irv and Tillman are referencing. They're out of district costs that we have no impact on, and then pension and retiree health insurance essentially wipes that entire amount out. So when the conversation turns to the towns being asked to take on a larger percentage of our budget, that is entirely true, but that is also entirely out of our control. And we wind up looking at a little less than half of the budget that we cannot impact. So when you're talking about reductions, you're talking about reductions from a much smaller part of our budget. And that's why the FTE reductions outstrip the decreasing enrollment, because that's the only place in our budget where we really have the ability to change things. Thank you.
Counselor Hannigan, you have a question or comment?
Yeah, it's just clarification at this point. When Dr. Z talked about the deficits in the region and in Amherst, are those deficits for Amherst based on a 3.5% operating year-over-year increase? And for the region, what is that deficit that you talked about based on in terms of assessments that we've been talking about? Just so I can get an idea of what those numbers are based on.
Great question, Mandy. It is. Shannon can chime in, but it is based on a 3.5%. I think we've been updating our numbers as we've been in conversation. So it is based on whatever Amherst is currently supposed to give. We are running through some regional scenarios for 4 towns, because just getting that last night and having to project what our new deficit. But I believe, Shannon, you're there. Correct me if I'm wrong. It is based on a 3.5, correct?
For Amherst, yes, it is 3.5. For the region, it's based on an overall budget increase of 4%, but how much each town pays is still up for discussion. But just to give us an idea of where we are, I just used an overall budget increase of 4%.
Can I ask clarifying?
Yeah, please.
When you say overall budget increase of 4%, is that assessment overall increase of 4% or bottom line that includes all the state aid plus assessment increase of 4%?
Just the assessment.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Irv.
Just want to remind the audience and people here that it's really not a good idea to evaluate the school's budget based on per pupil costs and then try to compare it with other districts. That is not a fair way of going about it. Doing it has been something that has been said by other experts in the state, that's not really a good way to do it. Because as every person or every person who's ever taught in the classroom knows, that every student that comes in the classroom are not the same. They are different and their needs are different. They present a different level of needs across a spectrum, and that those needs have to be dealt with. Not only have to be dealt with in terms of what our districts want for our children, but also because of the requirements of state and federal and state requirements. Those things have to be dealt with, and those things that have to be dealt with come with a cost. And so this is something I will be hammering home over and over again for those out there who say, well, you do have a declining enrollment, therefore you should have a declining budget, or at least a budget that keeps pace. That is a false kind of assumption. And that assumption has been debunked all over the place, but people still keep using it. And it's not fair, not right, not intellectually honest.
Are there other questions or comments with regard to the schools? Okay, then since we started out in all cases with the primary leader of the organization, let's start with Paul for the town, and then we'll move to others.
Okay. Yeah. So, and Holly and Melissa can jump in. So this health insurance thing, like everybody else, and the budget constraints are very real for the town. Um, our entire increase in taxes will pay for the health insurance if it stays at the 19.92%. And that does not take into consideration any COLAs, any collective bargaining agreements, or any increases like that. It's a devastating number, and so we're in this as well as you. You know, our budgets have not grown other than for contracted increases for the most part. And we've taken on additional responsibilities such as the new rental registration program, things like that. Uh, and so I think that there are significant challenges, and we're just sort of we're a little bit behind all of you because that's our budget timeline is about a month behind everybody else because where we are. So as we are going through our budget meetings and our hearings with our various departments, we're hearing it loud and clear what they're not able to do, what costs are going up for computer services, you know, for our contracts for computer services at a very large rate. So, yeah, it's bad.
Melissa?
Melissa.
Well, I don't really have anything to add to that. Just that, you know, we are continuing to look at this, and we will, you know, continue to look for opportunities to increase allocations to departments. But at this time, you know, this is what we felt comfortable being able to share. And, you know, it's just going to be a really hard year for everyone. That's all I have to say about that.
Thank you. I want to recognize that from the town council, we have two people from our finance committee, Councillor Haneke and Andy Steinberg, and then Anna Devlin Gother, who's also been on the finance committee in the past and, you know, on other financial things. Do you have other comments you would like to say? Any other councillors? Andy.
Yeah, I think that the one thing that Deb said that I want to emphasize really is something that affects all of us, and that is a lot of these cost increases that we're dealing with are not really within our control. When on the finance committee, when we hear from various department heads about what costs are driving their budgets, things like DPW and what they're paying for construction costs, what everybody's paying for energy, fuel costs, equipment, everything that seems to be, you know, driving in addition to personnel costs, which in health insurance costs, which we all know about, they are going up and they are not in our control. And it's a very difficult set of circumstances to comprehend and to deal with. You know, we probably hear more about complaints about roads and sidewalks and why aren't we doing as well as neighboring towns. We put more money in and pave less miles over time simply because the costs are going up beyond our control.
Anna Devlin Gother.
Yeah, just a quick comment, and it's not going to be to the specifics that were talked about today, but I would love to request that this group be meeting on a more regular cadence than I believe it has done in the past, and that the town manager, the respective leads of the different areas all consider also convening or requesting meetings for the full bodies to come together more often than we do to have these conversations. It's unrelated to today's numbers, but I think it's especially important this year that we be having these conversations more often than we have been in the past. So I'd like to request that. And then at some point, again, thinking kind of in that longer, more strategic hopefully way. One of the other things I think we should discuss at some point is the timelines for each of these bodies and how we develop our budgets. I think we get into a really sticky spot because of the timelines that different things are coming out from the different bodies. And I'd like for us to, I think this group would be an appropriate place to at least have the conversation to get on the same page about when we are at different phases of our process, and make sure that we're not setting ourselves up for failure. I think lots of things shift with transitions of government, and I don't know that this one has been addressed as cleanly as it could or should be.
Thank you, Anna. Councillor Haneke.
I want to support everything Anna just said, especially since we are 3 minutes away from the scheduled hour and we've not even really reached the hard sort of discussion of can we live within these numbers or what could we do about these numbers? We've just talked about how hard they are. And so if we're trying to keep these to an hour, we need to be meeting weekly, so that we can delve right into that conversation of questions like, is the school committee looking, where does the Amherst School Committee at this point stand on adopting a budget that is at a 3.5% year-over-year increase? Because last year at Four Towns, we all thought we had an agreement, and then the regional school committee passed something very late that was not within that agreement, and it threw all 4 towns into crisis mode, in a sense, to try and figure out what to do with something that we had never talked about at any Four Towns meetings. And we haven't even gotten to those conversations in BCG. And part of BCG is to try and ensure that, obviously we're not voting, but that we think committees will be able to figure something out within these numbers. And if they aren't going to be able to figure something out within these numbers, what numbers are they looking at? And how do we deal with that amongst all 4 entities? That's why we're here, and we're an hour in and we haven't even broached that conversation yet.
Agree. Deb Leonard.
I had a couple bookkeeping questions, but yes, to Councillor Haneke's point, last year was anomalous. I believe the requests to deal with the process and the timeline have been well heard and hopefully addressed. But I also, like Councillor Devin Gauthier, would like some clarity around timeline and process, because listening in on the last Amherst Town Council meeting, when you were voting representative or deciding not to vote a representative of 4 towns, I was again confused about process, because Councillor Hegner spoke to not speaking at 4 towns anything more than we have budget guidelines, and that explains my confusion around 4 towns. I thought the caucuses were more of an opportunity to discuss, but if the town position at 4 towns is we have nothing further to add than what we've already spoken to, I don't understand the point of 4 towns. So some clarity around process and how the pieces fit together would really be appreciated.
Paul.
Yeah, so 2 things. One is just for Councillor Haneke, this meeting, I have it scheduled for 2 hours. So at least that's what it's been posted as. So by notes, we had been alerted that some members have to leave. I think Tillman had to leave, so we know that some people can't commit the entire 2 hours, but according to the posting, it's 2 hours. And in terms of, I just wanted to note that I really want to thank Shannon and Kate and Dr. Z. We've really developed strong communication together, and I think that that's been a really beneficial relationship that's been developed between the staff and Melissa and Holly on our side. So I just want to recognize that staff-wise, we're working well as a team. The numbers are just not very easy to work with, but they're working in goodwill with each other.
Well, I'm hearing first of all, that we are scheduled for more time, but I would like to have people confirm whether or not they can stay for more time. If you can't, please raise your hand and let us know. I know people have full-time jobs and full-time responsibilities. Counselor Haneke.
So I was supposed to be somewhere at 1:30 because normally these are only scheduled for an hour. So that's when I put in. I can work on getting that done. I'm going to go off screen while I multitask for the rest of this so that I can do what needed to be done in that time.
Before you do that, Anna.
I'll be here and I'll be listening. I just won't have my video on.
Thank you so much. Anna, how about you?
I can stay. I may need to turn my camera off for a moment if I get a call. I had to turn it off for a second. I had a 1 o'clock thing I had to do, but yes, I should be able to stay.
Are there other people with constraints? Then one of the things I'm hearing is that we would all like to understand the different budget processes and timelines for each of the entities represented here. And I guess for the purposes of this discussion, let's start with the town. And that to some extent tells us a little bit about the library and also when the school is expected. And then let's flip to the school. Okay?
Yep.
Paul.
So the town is governed by the town charter, and that's the charter under which we operate. And it sets deadlines for when budgets have to be presented. So from the town manager to the council, I must present a budget by May 1st. From the library and the schools, they have to present a budget to me by April 1st. So they all, by definition, a month ahead of us in terms of preparing the budget. We take the numbers that they provide and build that into the overall budget. And it's my responsibility to deliver a budget to the town council, which is the ultimate appropriating authority. That's a balanced budget. So that's the time frame. And but we do recognize that the schools are also working with towns that have a different time frame. The regional school is working with 3 other communities that have different timelines than the city version that the town of Amherst has.
Paul, can you also confirm that the charter requires that we adopt a budget by June 30th?
June 30th, yeah. June 30th.
And that is a budget that includes money appropriated for all of the entities represented.
Correct.
Okay. Melissa, did you want to add to the timeline process discussion?
Yeah, so what I wanted to add is that, so when we compile these budget projection sheets, there's 2 pieces to it. And so a driving part of these discussions are the revenue pieces, because that lays out what the different entities can do with those revenue pieces. And the unfortunate part is that we start very early here at Amherst, and it feels like, well, you're just giving us the low number. Well, that's because we don't know anything, and we don't really know anything until January. Like that's when we know what our new growth was. We have a really good idea of what our how our departments are performing up until this point, and we don't have anything from the state as to what the state aids is going to look like until January. So I just don't I understand that it's challenging for the other departments, but I don't think I could personally, I don't think I could give any more information in September when we first met. I can only give more information now because I have more information. And so I just wanted to sort of highlight that that's part of the challenge is that I can't give good numbers until we have more information from the state, and we have set our tax rate, and that all of that happens in December and January. So I just wanted to add that part.
Are there any other comments about the town process and budget timeline? Okay, then Dr. Z, Shannon, who would like to speak to the budget process for the schools? And you probably need to separate it into 2 different processes. One is the region and the other is the elementary.
So we we generally we start our budgets super early. This year we did, I think we started looking at them in September and October. And that's for all of our budgets. We have the budget hearing for all 3 districts in February. And then after the budget hearing and feedback, we take that information, revise, and then bring the budget to a final meeting to school committee in March that is then voted on and sent to each of the towns. The region is the one with the strictest deadline because there's 4 towns involved and it has to be so many days ahead of their scheduled meetings. So the general rule of thumb is voting in March meets that deadline. And Amherst follows the same schedule for the public schools, Amherst Public Schools. And then of course along the way we have our 4 towns meeting and our meetings internally, and a lot of information is not known for our budgets, like Melissa said, in January when the cherry sheets come out and the governor's budget, etc.
May I just clarify, when you say in March, beginning of March, end of March, do you have a deadline you would try to reach?
So it depends on the meetings for the region. It depends on the meetings that the towns have, and you have to count back, I believe it's like 45 days prior to that. So we have it's not the end of March, it's normally the beginning to middle of March.
Thank you. Deb.
2 points. I have the dates and I'm not 100% sure. I thought it was 40 days ahead of the earliest town meeting that we have to have a voted budget in for the region. And the earliest of the towns is both Shutesbury and Leverett have annual town meetings the last Saturday in April, and then Pelham has theirs the second Saturday in May. And of course, there needs to be a budget hearing prior to that. And then just, I understand, of course, that nobody has a crystal ball and we're all trying to do the best we can. The earlier 4 towns meeting that we scheduled was in response to the requests by the 4 towns to have earlier and more frequent informational meetings. So it was not an attempt to make things more difficult for the town. Thank you.
No, what I'm hearing is a desire so the next thing I'm hearing is a desire for this group to meet more often. In fact, perhaps weekly or at least every other week for a while here to create better understanding and explore options. And then there was also a request at some point that we have what I would call a committee of the entire whole, which is somewhat what we do when we actually do the financial indicators meeting at the beginning of November. So we would have to work with each of the bodies to figure out when the best time to do that would be. That's a little more difficult to schedule, particularly if you're looking for a quorum of each of the bodies. But we also have on this agenda an opportunity now to have just general discussion. Thoughts, questions, etc. Councillor Hanneke.
It sounds like it's going to be an awful year for all 4. And that doesn't mean one is more important than another, or one is less important than another, or one I just want to make clear that if there's an operating area that's not out there saying our deficits are really bad, it's not necessarily because they aren't bad. They just might be choosing not to be as upfront with the hard decisions they're making. But it's clear to me when I hear from town budget status that that 3.5% increase is subsumed solely by health insurance increases. And which means COLAs are on top of that, step increases are on top of that, all of the equipment and other sort of areas are on top of that. Our level services is not met at 3.5% either, even if the town or the library or other entities are not out there saying that directly like the schools are. Another thing I wanted to address Deb Leonard's comment about 4 towns. I don't know how the other 3 towns caucus, but we have 13 members of a council with a school committee that sits in on those caucuses. That we don't have enough time to fully caucus, debate, and return, even if we had a quorum and told our entire council that at that meeting we might take votes so that they showed up. We don't have time in those meetings to actually take votes. So we as a council cannot speak about any agreement as school committees are concerned about doing too, unless we've actually voted that agreement. And so if at 4 towns, there's a desire to come in and get each of the 4 towns to say, yes, this is a voted decision, we need information. We almost need 4 towns meetings, 2 in a row. One to give us the information, one a week or 2 later where we can have a council meeting in the middle of that to actually have the discussion and make the decisions. To expect us to be able to do that at a meeting where we're given 20 minutes to discuss amongst 20 people sometimes, or 12, 14, 15 people, is impossible. So if that's the expectation, and that's one of the reasons I think the council pulled away from designating a spokesperson, because I think it was being seen as something it wasn't intended to be seen as. If that is the intention, we need to know that and have information ahead of time so that we can have our own discussions ahead of time. We can't talk theoreticals before we even get presentations. I am concerned that for the last 3 years, one of the school committees, last year it was the region, each of the 2 years prior, it was the elementary school committees, voted budgets that were outside the guidelines set forth within these BCG meetings. And it came in some sense as a surprise to the council and even the BCG group, because at BCG, anytime we met, there was never any indication during the BCG meetings that those votes above these guidelines might happen. So if there is discussion going on at any of the 4 operating entities, council included, that is thinking about not abiding by that 3.5%, in some sense saying, you know, we're thinking about voting a budget that would cost more than that. Now is the time to talk about that so that we can have those discussions. And I guess I felt like the last 3 years I've been on BCG, that hasn't been discussed. And so I think I would like to see a lot more forthrightness about what is being discussed amongst all the 4 towns. At the council at this point, all I understand is that the town manager intends to abide by that 3.5% number when he presents the budget on May 1. I would expect if he doesn't intend to abide by that, that he would tell the council, and in these meetings, we would be able to bring that up. But if there are other entities that don't intend to abide by that or aren't sure they can abide by it, right? We don't know. We need to be discussing that now.
I'm going to build on Mandi Jo's comment, which I want to thank you for, Councillor Hanneke. We also can't expect you, the representatives from the school or the library, to come to this meeting without having talked to your respective boards. So, and the same thing is true for when we gather at Four Towns. So what I'm hearing is, how can we use opportunities of meetings to share information and then use time in between for the individual bodies to discuss information and then convene again? That's what I'm hearing that might allow us to have a much more full conversation at these meetings. Even if we have what I would call a committee of the whole body, okay, all the elected officials, even if we had that, unless your individual groups have had discussions, you can't at that meeting quickly caucus in a 5, 10, even a half-hour period and come up with a unified statement. So thank you, Councillor Haneke. Irv.
Really, thank you both, Councillor Haneke and Lynn, for bringing this up, because I can almost guarantee that the discussions that have taken place and that will take place both within the elementary schools and the regional schools are going to be discussions, are going to be really hard discussions around the budget, especially when you're talking about budget deficits north of 1.7 million, and the level of cuts in terms of staff, especially student-facing staff, that it is highly likely that the elementary schools and the regional schools are going to be asking for additional funds. I would be stunned if we did not do that. I know in terms of myself, when I think about the elementary schools and I think about the students that we have in those classrooms in elementary schools, I think about the pictures, i.e. the picture of a typical student in our school, and the needs that they present and have presented and will continue to present in our classrooms. The mandates that we continually have to meet, that having to face those cuts, and we haven't even really looked at the other factors that will impact it, that yes, we're more than likely to be coming forward with requests beyond the 3.5. Definitely will be, and I would be stunned if we didn't. It would be stunning. In fact, I'd be willing that, the elementary schools will most likely, as well as the region, will most likely be looking at that. Now, having said that, I would like for the council and the town to consider looking at the last 5 years in terms of the surpluses that the town has produced, and that we look at budgeting in such a way for the town that you don't have that surplus of 5%. That you look at, I know you all talk about conservatively budgeting, but but when you conservatively budget for the last 5 years and you have 5%, that's more than that means that money that could have been used, especially for the school, was not used. I know that's an assumption to say, well, if it all came from the school surplus, but no. We can't continue to do that. And I would ask the town to look at another way of going forward in terms of budgeting, other than the quote conservative budgeting that produces a 5% surplus.
Paul, I'm going to call on you because I think you've raised your hand to respond to this.
Yeah, I could guess.
Yeah, so I think first off, I want to say the surplus next year will be more because we took defensive posture on our ARPA funds in order for to protect our ARPA funds in anticipation of the change of administration in Washington. We have we'll be delivering all that ARPA funds into free cash. It will make our free cash look larger, but where did that money come from? It came from the town side. And I want to make a big point that most of that surplus we're talking about, whatever the free cash is coming from, is generally generated from revenue that's been generated by the town, or cost savings that have been on where the town hasn't expended the funds to the fullest extent due to vacancies or whatever. And we can prepare examples of what that looks like and what the schools have contributed. But I just want to say free cash is, and well, we have a lot to say about this, so I think it might be a different topic, and I'd rather be more prepared for talking about it. But I do want to put out there now that because of our what we've done, and we'll be talking to the council about this on Monday in terms of the protecting the ARPA money, which we were, and I think we were prescient in doing this by in the end of December to protect the money. It will make our free cash look bigger next year.
Deb Leonard.
Lots of good conversations, and I'm glad we're having conversations. Last year was my first year, and I don't want to spend a lot of time belaboring what happened last spring because we've learned a lot. But to reassure Councillor Haneke, we have no intention of surprises. We did not intend to be surprising last year. The timeline and the lack of institutional knowledge and the interim position of our superintendent and doing a superintendent search, there were a lot of pieces that went into not being well informed about the process. And in particular, I just want to stress that the conversations within the regional school committee about what those budget reductions looked like from a programmatic point of view, which is where our responsibilities lie as a school committee, is not to make decisions about how the budget is apportioned, but what the impact is on the programmatic side. We did not get, and I have to say, we never got 100% clarity over the entire course. But I will say we did not get that kind of information until March from our people. So, and then again, the guidance from FY25, the budget guidelines went to a Amherst School Committee that couldn't meet because it lacked a quorum, and a regional school committee that wasn't able to report out to be reported, to get reports from the Amherst School Committee representatives the same way. And it wasn't until this past year that there was a regional school committee representative on this committee. And perhaps I understand that previous school committees interpreted that as an opportunity to serve a dual role, but absent my colleague Tillman Wolf in this meeting, I've really tried hard to stay in my role as Amherst School Committee representative. So those are my thoughts on those. I would love some clarity, Paul, on understanding the vacancies and the impact, because, you know, all I have is spreadsheets without words. I mean, as the years have gone along, the descriptions in the annual budget have decreased. So I've had to go back to 2017 to get some insight into that. I'd love a glossary where you actually like break out what each of those lines is. I don't know how much extra work there is. I would like that for the Amherst and Regional School Committee documents as well, so I can understand what those lines mean. Nobody is taking aim at ARPA funds. I think Irv spoke to previous surpluses, not this upcoming surplus and well, that was 3.5 million, if I'm not mistaken, of ARPA funds that will be appearing in free cash. And it is quite in the forefront of my mind that is ARPA funds. And then just in terms of voting a 3.5% budget, I'm pretty sure that we're looking at 30 more reductions in teachers or paras. And I do not see this committee being able to, or our administration being able to provide an educational experience that is adequate with those kinds of reductions. So I don't, just again, I came prepared to speak to the Amherst budget, and that's what I have in front of me. But I don't see Dr. Z having that kind of, there's no crystal ball. I don't see her having a magical wand either. That's gonna hit. That's of the 285 positions supported by the general fund in the Amherst school budget. So that is 10.5% overall reduction.
So I want to continue along this line, but I want to make sure that before we finish today, we have an agreement on the items that we would like to have on our next meeting, whether that be a week or 2 weeks from now. Okay. And I'll call on Councillor Haneke and Irv Rhodes in a moment, but I'm going to throw out 3 items. Okay. One is a much more thorough understanding of free cash. Where it comes from, what of it is really free, and how did we get there? Okay, a much better understanding of that. I also think we're skirting 2 other big issues. One is the issue of our capital needs. And we have them. We all have them. And we share those capital needs. And I think it's important for us to recognize what they are. And the third is really a word that's just going to set this group on fire. And that's called, how do we do an override? And we've never done an override except for the debt exclusion for the school, for the elementary school. I don't know how we do an override with this council. So we need to understand that process and whether that's part of the suggestion. With that, I'm going to just make sure we all have any other opportunity to comment and add or comment on that, as well as any other comments. Councillor Haneke.
Given what I'm hearing, and I have some comments and thoughts on some of this, I think an override discussion is necessary. The mechanics of it are the same as it was for the debt exclusion. It literally is a council vote to put some override number and an actual dollar amount on a ballot and have a ballot. Now, do you call a special election to do it before an X fiscal year, or do you do it at the upcoming one in November? That would be, and then in effect the year after, you know, those are, but the mechanics are the council votes to put it on a ballot.
Right.
But discussing that as a possibility might be worth having. I want to echo the manager's comments about surpluses. Our guidelines were written to indicate a maximum goal of surplus. And I wouldn't even call it a goal of surplus, but sort of saying, you know, there's been, and I've been one of the instigators of it every year, saying, are these surpluses too high? Are we too conservative in budgeting? And so we decided to this year put in sort of a percentage surplus that would stop that conversation from happening. You know, if the surpluses are above 5%, we can talk about why were they so high. That's more than we want to see in a surplus because of the lost opportunity for using them in the fiscal year the revenues are generated, right? But if they're under that number, that's a financially, fiscally reasonable number to have. It wasn't aim for 5%. It's more of a when the year end ends, was that a reasonable surplus or was it not? To talk about. But when you look at this past fiscal year's surpluses, about half of it were due to interest, and our finance director talked about the changes we've made to the updated numbers to address some of that, yet we don't want to address it completely. We don't want to suddenly budget 1.8 million in interest, because when interest rates go down or we're not carrying as much cash for projects that are going a little slower than we thought, that comes out of the year after's budget and can't be budgeted again. And then we see maybe not any increase in operating budgets on year over year, because we had to remove and change that line from a $1.8 million number down to 100,000. That would also be devastating. So I think the council and the council has pushed, and the finance director has done what seems to be at this point reasonable to be a little less conservative while also being confident that we won't run a deficit. And that's one thing we have to be confident of, that we don't run a deficit. The other half of last year's surpluses were basically the town, not the school, not the library, not the region, the town, because the town didn't have all of its positions filled. Maybe there's a discussion on, should we even have those positions if we're not filling them? I don't think that's a BCG discussion, but frankly, we haven't been able to fill them, not because they're not needed. Our fire department is running at least 4 positions low. They can't find people, but we cannot cut those positions. We must keep them in the budget. But as they run that low, that means that budget is underspent for the year, and it comes in as a surplus in the next year. And then people say, well, you should have spent it on the schools. Well, if we had had people to hire in the fire, we would have spent it on fire. We need to sort of keep it in there. I have, so surpluses on the revenue side, I think the council and the manager and the finance director are making strides in trying to be closer. The surpluses from the expense side, I struggle with redistributing those to non-town places when it was the town. Irv, I thank you for being honest and blunt and saying it's likely not going to be at 3.5%. That gives us something to talk about. Yet what we would need to talk about is, where does that come from? Because it can't really come from reducing the town side of operating, or the library side of operating, or the capital, because we have these capital needs, which means we either have to find more revenue somewhere, which we've done our best doing so far, unless you see something that's too low, or we would be violating our financial policies of using savings, or what we generally call one-time money, to pay for operating expenses. And that is not a ideal situation to be in, and kind of doesn't sit right with me. So if there are ideas on where that extra money could come from, I'd love to hear it, that don't violate our financial policies. And then 2 questions, one for the elementary school and one for the region. We are building a new elementary school, which means in the start of 2026, which is 2 fiscal years from now, not the one we're discussing, but the one after that, in theory, there are some consolidations that will happen because a building closes, and there will be monetary savings because a building hopefully closes. There will be personnel savings in theory, because there's more efficient use of space and persons and all. At least that's what was said all through the building process. And that would all result in budget savings. What I think would be really important for a council to know, especially if you're seeking something above the 3.5%, is what positions when the new school opens, what does that budget look like with those new numbers? And what is needed to potentially bridge from this year FY25's current fiscal number, what might be needed in FY26 to bridge us that 1 year to get to the FY27 consolidated budget? Whether that is presenting that budget with what positions would not be there at that time and what operational efficiencies would not be there at that time, and saying, but because this is a bridge year, we might need that, and that could be paid for by savings or one-time money or something, because it won't be needed the next year. Some conversation or something that addresses the fact that in theory, in FY27, the elementary school level, if you want to talk about level services number decreases tremendously. At least that was what was told to us years ago when this consolidation happened, is that level services would go down. The cost of level services would go down because positions would not be needed. Certain positions would be eliminated or consolidated. Utilities would go down, maintenance would go down, all of this would go down. So talking about the FY26 budget in relationship to the FY27 budget would be extremely helpful from me as a counselor point of view. On the region side, I asked similarly, in the September Four Towns meeting, Dr. Z talked about a new way of budgeting that presented what I perceived as a level services budget at an assessment increase year over year of 4%. So the same assessment increase they're looking here that would be level services and meet level services, because there was a consolidation of K-7 to 12 schools into one building. It appears that that is no longer in conversation. And so my question, as we begin conversations at the region level and talk about some bluntness of we're going to need more money to keep level services at the region above that 4% assessment total increase, is what happened to that plan that would have allowed potentially allowed, I know the health insurance number was not in there, potentially allowed the region to come in with a level services budget. Level services does not mean level employment. Level services means level services at that 4% assessment number, and why that was abandoned such that we might be cutting services now and still need to spend more money to do so. I hope that was kind of clear.
That I'm adding that to a future meeting, since we're not going to have it at this meeting, obviously. Irv, please unmute.
Mandy, thank you for that. I mean, those are excellent sort of questions and issues that need to be addressed, both from the elementary and also for the region. Two things in my mind, we, myself and Deb, are representatives from the Amherst Elementary School, but we sit on the region. So we know what the needs are from both ends. And both sides. For me, it's really difficult not to think about both of them, because I know the budgets for both of them and I know where we're going with both of them. So when I speak, to me, I'm going to speak both. I'm going to say, hey, here's what it looks like for the elementary, and here's what it's going to look like for the region, and here's what I think we're going to be coming back to the BCG with, and what the school committee is likely to do. Mandy, you made an excellent point, and I think that that's, in terms of the bridge, that's something that the school committees need to take seriously, in terms of, hey, we're looking at fiscal 26. Can we look at this as a bridge year as related to fiscal 27, when there are likely to be some cost savings because of consolidation? That's a very good point, and I think that is something I hope that myself and Deb will take back to our committee. to the school committee, because that's one way of looking at it. I also appreciate that we're having this conversation now in terms of budgets going forward. And what I put out there is that it's highly unlikely that the elementary schools are going to be able to not come back and ask for additional funds, given the level of cuts we're looking at. The deficit is just extraordinary. So I would like for us to think of ways in which we can go forward and being able to have these discussions not only in BCG, but also in the school committee, where we can bring it back to the BCG as we move through the budgeting process. But just be aware, and Lynn, and you made this point, no surprises. There will be no surprise in relationship to what I am saying and what the elementary school system schools are going to be saying. Trying to live within that 3.5% is not only challenging, but in some cases unrealistic. And we will come back with a realistic budget that will not be, and this is just my assumption, within the current guidelines. And that we will try our best to be within those current guidelines, but in my heart, in my mind, when I look at and I think about those student-facing positions that would have to be cut, I could not in good conscience come back and say, I accept that.
Andy.
Yeah, I was been thinking about a question that Irv raised earlier and Mandy responded partly to, which is the question of how much of the surplus is ending up in the budgets each year. For the last several years, it has been running roughly around 5%, but there's a couple things to recognize. One is that that's not always been true. There have been prior years, I'm talking within the last decade, not not distant past, where it's been 2%. And the reasons vary by every year. The one document that I would urge everyone to look at before the next meeting who is interested in this topic is Holly Drake's November 7 memo to the Finance Committee and Town Manager. There was the end of the year budget report, because she shows in there that there's a table on page 1 that shows the surplus for each year and an explanation of why there was that surplus. But the one takeaway that's most important for me out of that is that the reason is never the same, that there always seems to be a different factor. And they're not factors that one can predict. They're not factors that one can count on. And they're generally, as noted earlier, out of the town portion of the budget. They're not from other areas. And there are, realities that we have to cope with in trying to figure that out as to what that means. And I'm not going to speculate on that now. That's not the topic. This isn't the topic for the time for that discussion. But, it is something that is not such an easy topic for discussion. And I don't think that it's going to solve the long-term problem. And I think that the one real long-term problem that we need to deal with is, what does the revenue increase each year, and how, as a whole, do we live within the increase? Do we live within that level of increase for each year? Because what's happening is our expenses are going up faster than our revenue. And the last thing that I wanted to say is on the subject of override. It is a difficult discussion to have in Amherst in particular, because we have several factors that are unlike our neighboring communities, including Northampton, which we're most frequently compared with. We don't have King Street with a bunch of businesses and car dealerships and that pay large amounts of commercial tax. Our commercial tax base is substantially lower. Our taxpayers are to much greater extent our residents, either homeowners or renters. And as a consequence, to ask for an override and to really appreciate the impact on who's going to be affected by it, it is the people who live and work in the town, many of whom are the homeowners and now increasingly retired and seniors and living on fixed income. So this is not going to be an easy topic for us to discuss, and it's not going to be something where we can expect that the people who are going to vote on making the decisions, and particularly the people affected by the decisions, are going to be able to take this very easily, because it is, property taxes are already extraordinarily high. And the last thing that obviously we all know is a factor in driving that expense is the fact that we have a much larger amount of land that we don't really have the ability to tax. And that's sort of the unique circumstance of Amherst, because we have a tremendous amount of land that's owned by nonprofits, owned by the university, which is the Commonwealth. We are not getting, and they are not taxpayers. And we have, over the years, been very conscious of trying to do things in establishing conservation areas and agricultural preservation, and that has had an effect too.
Yeah, we're going to take one more brief comment. We have posted that we will have public comment. I need to call for public comment, and then I want to just wrap up with kind of what are our next steps. Okay, brief comment. Deb?
Give me a second to figure out which of my thoughts I want to pull out.
Meantime, I will ask if anybody in the audience on Zoom would like to make public comment. Please raise your hand now.
Okay, so quickly.
Yes.
Surplus versus free cash. I don't understand free cash, so I've been focused on surplus. I would clarity around free cash is welcome. I understand that there's a lot of concern about building things into the base. So I would wonder if there's any flexibility around, should there be a surplus, some of those funds being allocated to a stabilization fund. Northampton has started one for special education expenses, which is a large part of both budgets. And then the last part is override will help the elementary schools, but in terms of the region and the statutory method, increasing Amherst's share just creates that kind of pushback because it skews the overall budget in a way that is not sustainable for the other towns. So the region is a whole other thing, and I would really appreciate this committee's ability to draw those distinctions in terms of the needs, the structure, and what is built into those budgets separate from the elementary schools. I understand it's a relatively new thing, the having a regional rep on this. But they're very different. And then I guess my last very quick comment is there's nothing, the thing that I hear pretty regularly about from my constituents is it is extremely, it's like waving a red flag when when the message seems to be that because there is an aging population in Amherst, that the new generation cannot expect the same quality of education as the old generation because costs for that quality have increased, and that the previous generation is not willing to tolerate that. So I would say it would be interesting and important, if it's an override or not, to find out what our community wants from their tax dollars. Thank you.
Thank you. I've asked already whether there are any people who would like to make public comment. I'm not seeing any hands. I do want to recognize that we've had both counselors and school committee members in the audience who are not members of this body. And we certainly want to encourage any others who would like to attend. The things that I see as following up on this meeting are, first of all, is to poll for, oh, Holly, you had your hand up.
It looks like a hand just went up in the audience.
Oh, thank you so much. All right. Kathy Shane, please enter the room. We're going to limit you to no more than 3 minutes. I don't have a timer, so I'm going to just keep time.
I will be very quick. I have been listening. The one thing I can offer to the school committee on the question Mandy raised about consolidation is when we submitted to MSBA, we had to do a 1-page that said what would things look like if there were 2 schools rather than 3. And I will send that to you. Whether that would still be the way you would look at it, Dr. Z, we sat down with Mike Morris and just looked at every single line of staff and went through. So I will send that to you at least so you can see where this looked like 4 years ago. That's it.
Thank you,
Kathy. And I want to make sure that anytime a document is mentioned in this meeting, it then becomes part of the record of the meeting. So we'll make sure that that's part of the record of this meeting as well. So the next steps are that we will be polling for at least another meeting or 2, and maybe even a regular time for this group to meet over the next month or 2, maybe even beyond, but let's focus on the present. If there is a desire for a committee of the whole, we will need to know that. But I would suggest that this group meet first next time before we move to that. There have been several items that have been mentioned that people would like more information about. Free cash, and I'm going to add not just on the town side, but on the school side, because they may not call it free cash, but it's free cash. Second is, what is the process for an override? What would it look like? The timing, etc. And while there are people on this committee who have been through this process before, I want to make sure we have a level playing field for the understanding of how that happens. And then capital and our long-term look at capital needs. In addition to that, there was several questions asked about both the elementary school transition from 3 to 2 schools and the regional decision regarding the possibility of combining 7 through 12. And what would that look like, not look like, and where is the thinking on that? Other than that, this is not like a council. I don't get to set this agenda by myself. So I will be in consultation with all of you about agenda items. And I am going to suggest that the earliest that we would have our next meeting would be 2 weeks from now, since there seems to be a pretty serious demand for some information. And we're already looking at staff that are way overtaxed. Okay, Paul, comment?
Yeah, so I think there is a conversation to be had about what the role of this committee is, based on the town charter. And then also the staff commitment, for the council members of this committee, are we having duplicate conversations at the finance committee and then this committee, and like we're just we can't be in meetings all the time, and because there's preparation for every meeting, cleanup after every meeting, and I think I can speak for all of our staff here that meetings are an investment of time as well. So I all for high communication, which I really support, but just want to we should be judicious and clear about why we're meeting,
right,
and what the role of this committee is, because it is not a decision-making group here.
Absolutely. Okay. Are there any other questions or comments? Again, since we're not as formal, unless somebody would like me to make a motion to adjourn, seek a second, and take a vote, I will just adjourn the meeting. Okay, the meeting's adjourned.